John, we have an old friend and rival coming into a studio with us today.
It'll be great to see Jack Curry, and I hear he's got some good stories about you, Joel.
I hear he's got some good stories about you also, John. We have a special announcement tied to Jack Curry being here, and we have the great Keith Hernandez joining us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. Welcome to the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. And John, it's a different show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman because it's not just, I'm going to say our names for the third time, Joel Sherman and John Heyman. We're joined by Jack Curry, our longtime colleague, friend, etc. And why are we doing that? Because starting on Wednesday, September 14th, we're going to be on the YES app. We're obviously thrilled as a partnership for that. And we're thrilled that our first guest is somebody we have so much shared history with. We'll explain all that, but thank you so much for joining us, Jack.
Exciting to be here. I feel like this is just a conversation we're going to pick up from the last 30 years of being in a baseball press box. We're just going to share it with everyone now.
Yeah, no doubt. Can I get one of these up over here, maybe, because this is the place to start. So this is a very, very young Jack Curry, a very young me, a very young John Heyman. Sorry to say this is my dad, actually, in the background over here.
Well, how come I'm the only one who's shirtless?
Yeah, because you were buff.
Well,
the rest of us were a little more ashamed.
Well, you're acting appropriately. Notice how white Joel is. We're in Florida. Yeah. And look, I am working. It looks like I have a book or a newspaper, so I have to give myself credit there. But Jack's doing the right thing. That's what you should do at a pool.
Walkman. I'm pretty sure I've got a Walkman.
What do you think you're
there.
listening to? Jack is a music aficionado, so
probably The Cure or Depeche Mode or The Clash, something like that was probably filling my ears.
London Calling, right? The best album ever made, right?
According to me, yes.
Jack's a lot cooler than we are. Right?
Yes. Well, I remembered London Calling.
And it's very, by the way, I don't want to overlook this. It's very nice to see Murray in that photo.
Oh,
yeah, Murray was the
wonderful
best.
Memories of Murray hanging out with us in spring training.
Thank you. That's, I believe, the Fort Lauderdale Marriott North poolside. Very rare moment where we weren't running around trying to find George Steinbrenner or something like that. I thought an appropriate place to start would be, look, you could explain why John is at best the second best beat writer in the history of covering the Yankees, but let's do story time. Tell us your best John Heyman story. Tell us your best Joel Sherman story from 30-ish years ago.
I've got a Curry story.
So I get to roast you guys back? Are we going to leave this up here the whole time?
I hope so.
Oh, goodness gracious.
I think we've seen enough of that.
Well, first of all, before I roast, and this is probably not what you're supposed to do at a roast, but I have to say this. When I got on the beat, I was terrified because there were so many good beat writers. Not only the two of you, but Michael Kay, Moss Klein, Jack O'Connell, Tom Padula. So I credit the both of you for making me better at my job, because the only way you get better at something is to compete against people who are better than you, and watching you two work made me a better beat writer. So now that I've patted you on the back...
Let's also give the time frame. I went on the beat in 89. John, in 1990, you came on about midway through the 1991 season, right? Replacing Mike Martinez at that time.
All-Star break of 1991, as I said, terrified. Wanted to cover baseball my whole life. I was at the Times. I was 26 years old. I started out answering phones. Never knew if my path would take me to where I got, so I was thrilled about that. But my story about John is during maybe the beat years, but it's off the beat and path, so to speak. I had a barbecue once at my house. You were there. We played wiffle ball in the backyard. My nephews are now 29, 26, and 25. They're little kids. We said, hey, let's play adults against the kids. John goes out there and acts like he's Roger Clemens and is just buzzing wiffle balls at these kids. Ian, Shane, and Kyle, my three nephews, to this day, when they see John Heyman on MLB Network or read one of his columns, the first thing they say is, man, that dude could throw a wiffle ball.
Long ago enough, you officiated one of their weddings, right?
I did. My nephew Ian was married about 9 or 10 days ago, and I was the officiant for the wedding, which was a tremendous honor.
You want to go back with this?
Well, I remember the New Jersey Dream very well. And
that was Jack's house. We called it the New Jersey Dream.
That's the life. You know, you've got to measure up. You know, if you're not going to measure up, and I know the kids were, what are they, about 4 years old? No, they were a little older than that, right?
Probably preteen to teen.
Well, you know, I played wiffle ball quite a bit in my day. And
there's no explanation,
No,
John.
I know.
You let the kids win.
Really? Oh, well, that's not me. But anyway, Kyle was very good, I remember. So he hit some balls, so, it wasn't bad. And I apologize now. I'm a little late. I'm 30
fun.
years late, and I'm apologizing for striking him out.
We have a great story out of it. Joel's story is probably a little harsher, and it gets back to being around the stadium. So when the Post did not have a Saturday paper in the mid-'90s, up until whatever year.
Well, I got hired to be an investigative reporter when it went to a Sunday paper in '89, and the Sunday paper went away after, I think, even less than a year. And so I was the Yankee beat writer by then, and I think it came back maybe like 95-ish or so.
But because Joel was a workaholic, he would still go to the ballpark on the Saturdays where he didn't have to work. My wife, Pamela, flies into Chicago one weekend, and she wants to go to the game on Saturday. And I said, well, I have to leave really early. Joel volunteers because Joel is a foxhole guy. He's a great friend. He said, I'll take a cab with her. I'll make sure she gets to the right place. I said, oh, this is perfect. She'd never been to the ballpark. This will all work out. So that's foxhole Joel, looking out for you and for your wife. They get in the cab, and the guy is one of those chatty cab drivers. And he said, oh, going to see a ball game today? Pamela starts to answer, and Joel says, sir, haven't seen my friend's wife in a while. We just want to talk ourselves. And a minute goes by, and he says, so, big Yankee fan or White Sox fan? Joel says to the guy again, sir, we're just trying to have our own conversation. I think the guy tried a third time, and Joel said, your tip is contingent on you being quiet for the rest of the ride. Pamela is sitting there saying, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk to Joel or the cab driver. Sure enough, they get to the ballpark, and the fare was $15. And Joel, who I've seen be a very generous tipper, gave this guy exactly $15 and said, you blew your tip because you could not shut up.
Why do I believe that story?
What's harsher, throwing wiffle balls at 9-year-olds or telling a cab driver?
I was doing the right thing. I'm teaching him a life lesson.
I was teaching the cab driver a life lesson. No, shut the hell up.
He wasn't going to learn.
Oh, okay.
But Pamela did say that was Joel being a foxhole guy. To the people he loves and respects, the cab driver did not follow Joel's rules of life, and so he was thrown under for that.
So we could probably all tell stories about each other all day because we've known each other so long. I'll combine one back at you that involves your wife in the kind of the same thing with the foxhole thing. She pretty much implored me when we were on the beat together that I should drive all the time.
Very true.
Right? Because she didn't trust you as a driver, especially because of your sense of direction, which we were in spring training in Fort Lauderdale for how many years? Me and you together, 5 spring trainings. Like, Jack couldn't find anything.
All true.
Right? Couldn't find it. And I'd point out, Jack, like east, west, north, south, the Atlantic Ocean, it always has to be east. Yeah. Why can you not get this concept down? So I was the son of a truck driver, that guy over there. So I had a good sense of direction, and I did all the driving at the behest of Jack Curry's wife, Pam, the terrific Pam Curry.
Yeah, my story also about Jack and his sense of direction. The one thing I couldn't believe was we'd been covering the Yankees for a little while now, at least a year, and he asked me or one of the other guys how you get to the Braves spring training camp. Well, the Yankee spring training camp is basically on 95. Right. The Braves camp at that time
in West Palm
was on 95. One's Fort Lauderdale, one's West Palm. It's 45 miles north, and you could see the park from the 95. It's Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard still there. The ballpark not there. I couldn't believe it. But one thing about Jack, though, and I don't know what the drive. I know that New Jersey drivers aren't generally as good as New York drivers. You know this, yeah. Joel, anyway. But they must have a difficult test for parallel parking because he is the best parallel parker I've ever seen. Incredible. An amazing parallel parker.
Thank you for bringing it back, John.
So
grew up in Jersey City, had to figure out a park. Yes, I'm a terrible driver, but I'm a good parallel parker.
Incredible. The test must only be about parallel parking.
Okay, we're going to do a little parallel parking contest after this. John, Jack, of course, our friend, is the terrific, and I do mean this, the terrific pre- and post-game studio analyst for the YES Network for a long time now, after he left the Times, where he was a distinguished baseball writer for so long. And if we're talking Yankees in 2022, we're talking Aaron Judge, right? And so I guess the big question for me isn't, is he going to hit 60 or 61 or 62, or if that's the real record or not. Do you think Aaron Judge is going to be a Yankee moving forward? That feels like it's hovering over this season as much as anything else. What do you think?
Well, I listened to your podcast last week when you had Randy Levine, the Yankee president, on, and I was intrigued and interested in his answers. because we know that this is going to be a negotiation. This is going to be two sides sitting down and trying to figure out what's best for them. I'm going to give an answer that Yankee fans like. I do think that Judge is going to end up returning to the Yankees. If you ask me what the deal is going to be, the years and the numbers, I don't exactly know. We know what he turned down. We know the season that he is having, so we can all start to point north. But how far north are you going to point? Well, that will be between Judge's side and the Yankees side. But in having been around Judge enough and heard him talk about what the Yankees mean to him and what that legacy could mean, I do think these two sides are going to figure out a way to continue this marriage. What do you guys think? Do you think it's a...
Yeah, I agree. I think he'll be a Yankee. It's better for the Yankees. Obviously, he is the star of the team. Fantastic player. Been the best player in baseball this year. Should win the MVP. I think he will win the MVP. I also think it's better for him to stay. Maybe I'm being provincial here. Maybe I'm being a New Yorker. I don't know. The judges' chambers, they're all set out there in right field. He is already the Yankee. I mean, he could carve out a career like Derek Jeter had and be that kind of Yankee Hall of Famer. And, he certainly could be a Hall of Famer somewhere else because he's an amazing player. But, I don't know if it's me being provincial or not, but, we saw what happened with Freddie Freeman when he left. I feel like it would be the same kind of outcome, that he would be very upset if he left. I don't know that. He hasn't confided in me, but seems like it would be a big loss for him as well as the team.
Yeah, we talk about the Freeman thing. I think about Barry Bonds, who was a great player for the Pirates and ultimately ended up on the Giants. I think we all kind of look at the Giants as the looming team out there for him. And yet I'm with you guys. And I don't think it's provincial. I think he's been doing it well, but I think he's playing a part, which is act like, hey, when I'm a free agent, I'm looking forward to it. Like, it's a script. And now sometimes you can follow that script and end up like Freddie Freeman out in Los Angeles. But to John's point, the marriage works because it's great for both sides. I can't imagine the Yankees will be anything but a top bidder, if not the top bidder. And if that's the case, now is it going to cost them a lot more? I think the price starts at $313.5. I think he'll make a big deal out of getting $100 million more than the Yankees offered him. How do the Yankees say, no, we just watched a month of baseball where without him, how do they win games? And I don't know how much different the lineup could be next year.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's going to go quite that high, but you're a very generous guy, Joel.
Usually you're the high guy.
Yeah, I think he's amazing, but he is 30 years old. I think the negative for him in this negotiation is I think everybody knows it's better for him to stay in New York. So I'm not sure they're going to be the high bid. Someone will get to 300, I'm sure. I think I had predicted 288. You think you were at 3 something like that?
304. I've gone up again.
You've gone up. You keep going up. Well, he keeps playing better. I mean, he is amazing. I don't see the Giants at all, though, because I think he likes hitting those home runs to right center. I don't see many home runs to hit to right center. I know he's better than these other players in the National League, but I don't see many home runs hit to right center at that ballpark in San Francisco. So I wouldn't consider them the most likely suitor. I mean, they're going to go for him, I'm sure, but I wouldn't consider them the most likely landing spot.
Comfort level. I'm glad you brought up hitting to right center field. You brought up the judges' chambers before. What he means to the Yankees and what having him will mean to the Yankees, it just keeps leading me back to the two of them figuring this out. I think the Yankees know going into the offseason it's priority number one. And as you said, Joel, Judge has to dance. You have to assume that there will be other dance partners available. But I just think at the end of the day, these two sides, both of them would be making a mistake if they don't find their way back to each other.
Yeah, I'm sure every big team out there is planning the Dodgers on almost every big player have tried to do something short that was high AAV, annual average value. I'm sure they're plotting their 4-year 160, 4-year 200 for him. Judge has not been the Yankee problem in any way this year. They've struggled a lot in the second half. In the first half, Jack is working on a book about the 1998 Yankees, the inside story of the greatest team ever. He has 2 other books out. Everyone should do it. One is out right now. Paul O'Neill, Swinging a Hit, is out right now. His book with David Cohen, Full Count, also tremendous read. I think I helped edit both books.
You sure did.
So I've read the books.
I'll be sending you the 98 book, too.
We were comparing them to the 1998 team. They're not going to be the 1998 team, but the 1998 team was a champion. Do you think we're still watching a championship team?
That's a great question, Joel. My wife asked me that question all the time. I think that there is still a chance this team could win a championship, and I think a lot of that depends on who they get back and how do the guys that they currently have perform. Now, I know that may sound like I'm sort of waffling on my answer, but I look at Cole, and if he can be an ace at the top of the rotation, in his last 3 starts, he's kind of looked like that guy. I still think Severino is in play to start Game 2 for the Yankees. I think that they have nursed him back intentionally to get him ready for the postseason. I think you look at Nestor Cortez, and who can Montas be? He's been a disappointment so far. I like what their bullpen is shaping up to be. Holmes, to me, is a big key because you want to be able to say at the end of games you can lock that down. But again, I was thinking, I knew you guys would probably ask this, so I was thinking about this on the drive here. Who is in the lineup? Rizzo, LeMahieu, Benintendi, Carpenter. Are all those guys back? We don't know. I think Rizzo and LeMahieu will be. Benintendi has told friends he expects to play again. Is Carpenter a player for you in the postseason? So I don't know about those players, but I do think this team could still win a championship. I think the Astros are the obstacle.
You can throw Bader in there as well.
Yes,
They've got a lot of injuries. I think there's a separation. I think there are 5 teams that can win it. I think there are a lot. Obviously, we're going to see 10 teams make the playoffs, but I think only 5 can win it. I think the Yankees
12 teams make the playoffs.
You're right. My God.
2022.
How soon we forget.
If you want to throw the picture up from 94, we'll go with
No, we're good with that. We don't need to see that picture again.
12 teams in 2022.
I'm past 94, but I'm not up to 2022 yet. 12 teams, right. But I think only 5 really can win it. I think I'd put the Braves in there. I'd put the Astros, the Mets, the Dodgers, and the Yankees. So I think there are 5 teams that have really separated themselves from the pack. They are one of the 5. I would say at this point the Astros are the favorite in that league. I love their pitching. They have fewer health questions than the Yankees right now. I mean, the Yankees are a little bit dependent on Judge as it stands now and Stanton as he's come back. Obviously, they need Rizzo, who was great when healthy. I feel like they're the second most likely team in the American League, but they're in that group for me of the 5. We were looking at a team that was on pace for 122 wins. Now they're on pace for about 100, somewhere in that range. I don't think they're quite as good as the Astros, but they can win it. That's the way I look at it.
I think I didn't mention the inside story of the greatest team ever. Jack's book on the 1998 Yankees comes out in May. I didn't mean to conflate those with the books that are out about Paul O'Neill.
I got some work to do. Yes.
David Cohen that you should go to your local bookstore and buy right now. Look, I do think there's a pathway for them. I think one of them is that they lock down this division and they get that extra 5 days, because that could be the difference between Benintendi for sure and maybe Carpenter being healthy enough to play in that first round. You stay away from the, they
better win this division.
Yeah.
I mean, if they don't win this division, they're done. I mean, you cannot have
a 15.5 game lead and blow
then
it.
Say, now we're going to start playing in the second round. That's not going to happen. They got to win this.
And Saturday and Sunday went a long way towards making that happen. I mean, their magic number is 17 right now with 21 games left. The Blue Jays and the Jays are fighting each other right now. So even if the Yankees go 11-10 or 12-9, the Jays or the Rays would have to win 18 or 19 games. My math might be off by a little bit, but they put themselves in really good shape this weekend.
Yeah, and their advantage is the Jays and the Rays starting on Monday of this week had 9 games against each other. So, if they just split those games, it's going to be hard to make them up. Jack, I'm wondering, we talk about a lot of free agents at the end of this year. One of the big free agents at the end of this year, obviously Aaron Judge, is Brian Cashman. Right? So, in general, we've always thought, he'll come back. He's almost feels like family with the Steinbrenners. He's been there a long time. He's obviously been greatly successful. The team has never had a losing year under him. It's almost in the playoffs every year. What do you think about his job performance / is he going to be back next year?
I have not asked Brian Cashman that question, but something that you said within your question leads me to believe that Cashman will be back. Hal Steinbrenner, as a businessman, likes familiarity. He likes people that he can trust, and he trusts Brian Cashman as much as anyone in the organization. So I think if you asked Brian Cashman that question today, he wouldn't answer it. He'd say, I have a baseball season to worry about. We've got to get through this year. I mean, when you want to grade a general manager's performance, you You look at the moves that have been made, and obviously we could go down the whole list of them. Some of them have been successful. Some of them have not been. He's gotten a lot of criticism for the Montgomery Bader trade. Yet I say for that one, it hasn't been decided yet. Has Montgomery pitched great in St. Louis? Absolutely. But the Yankees made a decision. He wasn't going to get a postseason start for them, and he's not a bullpen option because he doesn't warm up fast enough. Bader is someone who, at the time they made that trade, they felt could improve them around the edges, defense and speed. They already thought they were postseason bound. How do you make your team better? So I think that if I were making a prediction, I think Cashman joins Judge back with the Yankees in 23.
Can I just throw in one thing about the Montgomery trade? I talked about this yesterday on MLB Now. We, at the MLB Network where John and I work as well. They were talking about how great Montgomery's did. Great, no doubt about it. Remember, John Lester and Jay Happ got traded there last year, lefties, right? One had a 6.5 ERA, one had a 5.5 ERA. They both pitched to low 4 ERAs, right? It's the NL Central. They haven't seen you. Great defense on St. Louis. The Yankees have a very good defense also. And I looked at Montgomery. The only above-average offense he faced, because I'm not counting the Yankees at the time he faced them, who were terrible, was Atlanta, who scored 5 runs in 5 innings against him. It's twice the Cubs, Colorado, a lot of bad offenses. So I'm with you. The whole trade hasn't been written yet. It looks terrible right now, but let's wait.
And one more piece, sorry, John. One more piece is Montgomery was replaced by Herman. Look at Herman's numbers since that trade, too. And I'm not alibiing for the trade. When you trade a guy who's 150-inning lefty and he puts up those kind of numbers, you're going to get criticized for it, but I think it's still evolving.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly understand the criticism, certainly trading Sears, too. Sears pitched a couple good games for them, and he's now with Oakland. So there is a concern about the pitching depth. I get it, and Montgomery has been really good. I would still count that game against the Yankees. It was very good. So, I mean, I think the moves have been a mixed bag lately, if you look at it like that. But he's been the general manager for a generation. He's been the general manager for about 25 years at this point, right? So they haven't had a losing season. You mentioned how likes familiarity. Stability is another word that I would use. He certainly is much different than his father. His father had many great qualities, but no one would say there was a lot of stability at times with the Yankees. So, I mean, I think the only way this is a real discussion is if they blow this lead and have to play as a wild card, and then they're eliminated in the first round. So I think there's a lot of caveats, there's a lot of contingencies that have to happen for this even to be a discussion. Otherwise, to me, it's a slam dunk, and that Brian Cashman will be back. And you have to look at the entirety of his career. The 25 years have been excellent. The last year, I would say you could certainly, it's not just the Montgomery trade. Some of the trades have worked, and some of the signings have worked, and some of them have not. Obviously, Trevino, Carpenter, some of them were Holmes, some of them fantastic. It's been kind of a mixed bag, but overall, excellent.
Yeah, you talked about pitching depth. Pitching depth actually isn't their problem, right? I think they're going to have some tough decisions if they get their guys healthy. Who exactly is going to be on the roster? Jack, the biggest news of the last week in baseball has been that they codified for next year a couple of significant rule changes that's going to obviously affect all 30 teams and the sport. I wonder if we look at it from 20,000 feet. What stood out to you the most? Is there one that you really love? Is there one that you really hate? Are you passionate about any of this?
Love the pitch clock, and I would call it a pace clock because it's not just about the pitcher. It's about the batter too. It's about the rhythm of the game. We've all covered long baseball games, and I've never been the guy to turn to someone in the press box and say, I can't believe this is a 3-hour and 20-minute game. But I would say I can't believe how slow this game has been moving. They cut about a half an hour off AAA games by using that pitch clock. I'm in total favor of it. I think pitchers who dawdle, Aroldis Chapman, somebody like that, you're going to have
Clay Holmes,
even Montas takes his time. You're going to have to speed up. You're going to have to get with the program as far as that's concerned. I love that rule. I don't love the shift. I don't love telling a defense how it can play. In football, if they put their 2 best wide receivers on the left side of the field, you're allowed to put 5 defensive backs over there if you want to. And maybe they'll throw it to the guy out of the backfield, and then they'll go to the right. I know they're saying it'll show off defensive players' athleticism. It'll open up for more hits. It'll eliminate the 4-man outfield. I would have always rather seen, even against a demon sinker like Clay Holmes, guys trying to just beat the shift.
Yeah, I love it all. I mean, I do. Certainly, we all love the pitch clock. We have deadlines still, so of course, it's better to shave 30 minutes off the game of dead time anyway. But I do like the pitch clock. The batting average was 243. You see some ugly plays where the third baseman's covering second, or I'd rather get rid of that. I know we see some great ones too. We see Manny Machado going out in the right field and making a catch near the warning track. So you do see some great plays that way with the shift. But I'd rather see the batters have a chance. And I think it's a more interesting game when the batting average is somewhere over 250.
So let me ask you guys this, because we were having this discussion at YES. So imagine I don't need a prop. So there's second base. And the shortstop is playing as close as he can get to second base. When the ball is released, do you think we'll see some slow pitch softball maneuvers where there are going to be shortstops who are? I mean, O'Neal Cruz could cover 15 feet in 2 strides. I think we're going to see that.
I'll tell you one I think we're going to see. Is the rule is you have to have 2 infielders on both sides of the bag, but it doesn't say anything about like where you position your outfielder. So I think some teams will still take their left fielder and put it in the champagne glass, put him in short right field, and play without a left fielder.
Wow,
and dare a team and say, I'm going to take away I'm going to take away the single and dare you to try to do what you still don't want to do, which might be a double or a triple, but I'm usually doing it against the Kyle Schwarbers. It's a double. Even, my center fielder will run over and get the ball.
And you could also have your third baseman playing as deep on the dirt as he wanted to, and he could hustle to get one. Maybe hold it to a double.
I'll say this: I think everyone will go. I think everyone will go into their lab. I think everyone's going to go into their lab and do interesting things because the rule is also minimum of 4. Like we see infields at the end of games when you're trying to shut it down, do 5 infielders. Maybe if you'll decide. We'll stop more hits with a guy literally standing up the middle and 5 infielders in the 3rd inning than we would with a left fielder.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. But
I don't put anything past the Tampa Bay Rays.
You're an unusual thinker. Yes. You have unique thoughts. You could run the Rays one day, I think. I'm more concerned about what Jack said. The guy running across the bag, running across the diamond. I don't want to see that. I think they should probably put that in the rule and outlaw it, but they haven't.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe it'll result in some fantastic athletic plays doing that, but I would have just rather seen no shift. But we'll see what baseball how it evolves in 2023. And I agree with what you said, John. I saw a list of the guys who have lost the most hits. I think Charlie Blackmon has lost 19 hits, and Ohtani had lost 17 or 18 hits.
Josh Bell lost a lot this year.
A lot on your average.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 40 or 50 points on your average.
Yeah. Well, I think the most important shift we can talk about is our shift where we're going to be on the YES Network's app moving forward. We're thrilled that to begin this, we had not just a member of the YES Network in Jack Curry, but our longtime colleague and friend. So, Jack, thanks so much for joining us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.
Had a blast. Thank you.
And we'll be right back with Keith Hernandez. Back on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. We're glad to be joined by our special guest, Mets Hall of Famer, perhaps soon future Baseball Hall of Famer, and Mets broadcaster Keith Hernandez. Keith, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
My pleasure.
Keith, I'm wondering if I could just reach into your kind of playing past combined with your knowledge of the current team and just what the experience is like coming to the ballpark now, what that mixture of exhaustion, but also exhilaration that you're in a pennant race. What do you feel? What are the Mets feeling right now daily? They're in a daily battle. You were in these kind of battles in your time, both as a Cardinal and Met. What is this experience like? Are you tired or are you thrilled or both?
You're obviously thrilled. If it's a first-time experience, it can be a little nerve-wracking. I can recall back in 1982 when we battled the Phillies down to the last month of the season and really didn't clinch it until the latter part of, the middle latter part of September. But the first 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks of September were very, I guess a lot of anxiety would be a better word. And I remember going up to Gene Tennis, who was our backup catcher, the veteran. And all those years he was there with the Oakland A's when they won in the 70s. And I just told him, I said, I'm a little bit, been a little bit queasy in my stomach and having a hard time sleeping. And he just looked at me and said, "What would you rather be? 28 games out of first place, playing it out?" And he walked away from me. So that was kind of succinct and to the point, and it resonated with me. It sunk in, and I was fine from that point on. So certainly, it's a long year. There's much more travel today with the additional 4 teams that were expanded. You didn't have Phoenix, you didn't have Colorado, you didn't have Miami, and it's more trips out to the West Coast, which are grueling for a East Coast team. And I'm sure that they are, I don't say tired. They're not tired. They're young men. They're strong. They've been conditioned for this, and they condition much better today. It's more probably the mental that will get you a little tired, and the fact that the games are 3.5 hours now instead of our day. They were 2.5, and they got an extra hour to stand around and watch a lot of 3-2 counts and a lot of walks and a lot of strikeouts doing nothing. Nothing is more tiring for a defender, you guys, than being in a game where it's cold or it's hot. It doesn't matter, and you just stand around. I'd rather go 4 for 4 with 4 triples, or hit 4 singles and score in a double 4 times and move. But when you're out there standing in the field, that tires you out more than anything. And they've got more travel and more stand around time today with the expansion and all the walks. But they've got to feel happy and pleased about being in September and being in the hunt. There's nothing like it. It's very exhilarating, and they'll learn from this, how far they go. They're going to be in the postseason. No matter what, back in our day, if you finished second, you went home. I remember '85 very, very, very much winning 98 games and going home. So they are going to be in the playoffs, and but you don't want to lose the division. You just don't want to lose the division.
Keith, thanks very much for joining us. I was down with the team in Miami, as you were. And, they lost one of the games to Miami. They lost 2 to Pittsburgh before that. They lost 2 to Washington. They just lost to the Cubs. The team's been great. The fans are very excited. I'm a little worried now, or should I not be? Do you feel like the team's in good position?
Well, they're in first place. That's good position. And the other team's got to catch you. And as long as you win, no one's going to catch you. That's easier said than done. I'm not horribly worried. I'm worried about the depth of the bullpen. I'm worried about not having a left-hander out there that you can rely on. They went 4-2 on that road trip. Now it's a shame they couldn't have gone 5-1 or 6-0, but I don't care who you're playing. When you're on the road, it's hard to sweep. And the fact that they, in both towns, Pittsburgh and Miami, they lost the first game soundly, then come back and win the next 2. That kind of showed me a lot right there. And, they're in the same position now with the Cubs, and it's nice to have a guy like Jacob deGrom taking the mound tonight. Bassett's been so good, and he was due for a hiccup. He was due for a bad outing, and he had one last night, didn't have command, but he's been solid. And I expect him to bounce back. Anytime you have a Bassett and a deGrom on the hill, it's like, Gooden and Darling, Gooden and Ojeda. It's hard to go into long losing streaks with those guys. You can, Scherzer's got to come back, but they got to be careful with him because he's got to be ready. I think if it comes down to it for that 3-game series in Atlanta, if that means something, they've got to have deGrom and Scherzer lined up.
Keith, you mentioned you would have liked to see them get a left-hander. As we're speaking, they kind of seem to be lining up to get Tylor Megill into their bullpen and also probably move David Peterson into the bullpen as a left-hander. Is that inspiration or panic as you see it?
I don't see it as panic. I just see it as a need. McGill's coming back. He's pitched well. He's not going to fit into the rotation. Peterson has been kind of in and out. He has potential. You don't know what you're going to get from him. I think the need for him is the need for a left-hander in the pen, another left-hander to go with Rodriguez, who Jolie is can have a good outing, can have a bad outing. You just don't know what you're going to get from him. So it to me is more of an experiment, and it's not desperation. It's a need. You got Williams, who's pitched very well in long relief and spot starting, and he's a veteran. And they never go deep with him. They've taken him out in the fourth inning where he's had a lead and he doesn't get a win, and he's fine with that. So I think that this is just the left-handed need. It's to see if Peterson, how he pitches, and they're going to run him out there and see what he can do. And if he pitches well, he'll probably be on the roster. The Mets have always had one over the years. You guys have covered the Mets. They've always, even back in the day when Terry was Collins was the manager, and going back, only had one left-hander. I always like, especially with 13 pitchers. I mean, come on, you can't find two left-handers. it kind of hamstrings the manager. Where if you've only got one, like Luke last year had a great year. He was our only left-hander. But when could you use him? Do you use him early? Use him? Do we want to save him late? And it just kind of hamstrings the manager. And if you have two, then you're able to keep your big guy, ready late in the game to get that big left-handed out. And I don't care about all this crap about, this guy's a crossover pitcher. I'm sorry. Left-hand hitters, you want a good left-hander out there, a lefty-lefty matchup. Now I'll take that any day, late and close.
Yeah, I was going to give you some of that crap about Lugo being a crossover pitcher. I think I'll pass on that for now. You mentioned deGrom. People look at deGrom and Scherzer as a key reason why the Mets could run through this. I get the feeling, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know him personally. Obviously, I've seen him for a long time. He's the best pitcher in the game when healthy. He's mentioned he's going to opt out. I certainly am taking him at his word that he will opt out. That doesn't mean he's leaving. What do you think? You think there's a chance that he'll stay? Because there are a lot of people like myself who look at it and say, I think this guy's leaving.
I'm not sure. Jake is kind of an elusive character, doesn't really reveal a lot. He's very closed, and I like him very much. But you don't get much out of him. Now, he's a Florida kid, and maybe he I don't know how to, I can't speak for him. But either way, it's a negotiating tool to say that you're running that out there, that you may leave, and that's good for negotiation. And it may just be a positioning negotiation for the off season. Would he like to play somewhere in the South, where he's from, Atlanta, Houston? I don't know, but I certainly wouldn't want to lose him. And this club has made the win right now. We average over 30 years of age, and this team is made the win. So, but I don't think you want to look that far ahead. I mean, I don't know what's going on right now. This season is most important. They're going to get in the postseason. They're going to have hopefully Scherzer, deGrom, and Bassett, and that is a very formidable threesome.
Keith, you used the term twice there, made to win right now. It's obvious, right? Scherzer's 37, deGrom, Diaz, Nimmo, Bassett, Walker, they all could be free agents at the end of the year. It feels like that. But you also mentioned, where is the lefty? The Mets and Billy Epler had a very successful offseason in bringing in talent. Were you shocked when we got to 6 p.m. on August 2nd that it was supplementary bats, the Naquins, the Ruffs, and no lefty reliever, instead just Michael Givens?
I was surprised, but my feeling was we don't know what's going on when there's trade talks between the general managers. And I think that a lot of the general managers that had a left-hander that we were interested in probably were asking for too much, realizing it was an immediate need, and maybe it was just the price was too high. That I don't know. We can only speculate, but it didn't happen. And it's a need now, and it's a glaring weakness, that's for sure.
You mentioned the long games. Obviously now in our position with the deadlines, we like the games shortened. There are a lot of new rule changes, not just the pitch clock, but the shift banning. Now, you were a guy who could hit the other way, but now you have a lot of players who are left-handed bats who can't hit the other way. Do you think this is good for the game generally, what was done, or you think they went far enough? Because, I don't know, I wrote a column saying they should have gone even further. Players didn't seem too happy generally. Some of them thought it was okay, but they voted against it. Where do you stand on the rule changes?
Well, I think it affected the left-hand hitters more than anybody else. And even though it did, they started playing more shifts against right-handers and taking that away, that their side, their pull side away. But it really affected the left-hand hitters. So if I was a player, I would have voted for it. If they're going to put three guys on the right side of the infield for me, and then they pitch me in, particularly with today the cutter, which really started in the 80s with the Montreal pitching staff with Charlie Lee when Carter was catching Montreal, and they had those great pitching staffs with Palmer and Rogers, Charlie Lee, Gullickson, and not so much Scott Sanderson. He was a curveball guy, but they had that cutter, and that cutter, if it's put in the right spot, belt high, and inside corner, it's a hard pitch to inside out with the right side of the end. It can be done, but not everybody can do it. I could probably do it. I didn't like hitting against that pitching staff. I did not like the right-handed cutter at all. It was a big problem. Something when I went and hit against a pitcher that had a good right-hander that had a good cutter, I knew I had to really be on point and be focused and very much aware of that pitch. And it's hard not to do anything but pull it. And so I would have had to alter my swing just a little bit if it was, and try to lift a little bit, but not lift a fly ball. I'll hit more line drive. A lot of times I would get the barrel out. I was a good situational hitter, runner on first, nobody out. I hit a ground ball, hard ground ball in the hole. It's first to third, and we're set up for a big inning. Well, that took that away. With that shift, it took it away. And that's why it hurt left-handers. And that would have been something I would have had to adjust to. I could not hit it on the ground and get a first and third and set up my 4, 5, and 6 hitters for a big inning. That was wiped off the board. So it would have to be ball hit in the air and really try to hit a double, pull a double down the line. And instead of just a base hit late and close, or base hits needed. So I'm glad it's gone, to be honest with you. And there's just too many mistakes in the field, because you got a third baseman turning a double play, you got a shortstop on the wrong side of the field coming over to maybe has to turn a double play coming from a position he's unfamiliar. It just made a mess of it, I felt, from a defensive point of view. So I'm glad it's gone.
Keith, it's hard to ignore some obvious stuff about the Mets this year. They have nearly a $300 million payroll. They've had a bunch of ceremonies that have run almost perfectly, smoothly, perfectly, including your Hall of Fame Day, Mets Hall of Fame Day, and Old Timers Day. And at Old Timers Day, Ray Knight voiced some pretty disparaging comments about the Wilpons and this being a new day. I wonder, do you think this is a new day, that there was pathology and ownership in the past, and that the Mets are now in position to be a dominant team? Steve Cohen said he wants to be the Dodgers. Are the Mets about to be a dominant team for a long time because the pathology is in their rearview mirror?
I think that there is definitely, Ray's got very hard feelings, and you heard Ray's story that, how he was informed that he wasn't coming back, before the parade, which I thought was very poorly handled. And Ray's a sensitive guy, and obviously his feelings are still very, very raw and hurt about that. As far as this team's concerned, we talked earlier, it's made the win now, and they got to go with pedal to the metal and get this done. And you mentioned earlier they've got a lot of guys that are free agents. Who are they going to bring back? You've got to bring back Diaz. You're going to have to pay him. Nemo is a very important piece of this team because he brings hustle and he sets the tone in the leadoff spot. I think that he needs to learn to steal some bases. If he could steal 20 bases, I stole 19 bases in 1982. Whitey gave me a green light. If I can steal 19 bases, he can steal 25. And that would be, he gets on base and the pitchers don't have to worry about him. it's all that's the factor. When you got base stealers, which is not part of the game like it used to be in the 80s, pitcher can focus more on the hitter, what he has to do, and not worry about the runner. I mean, the 1980 Cardinal teams, the pitchers today would either have to adjust, or they would like Syndergaard when Dusty Baker that one year when he took over the Nationals, they just stole him blind and drove him crazy. He didn't know what to do. So Nimmo, I feel, has to come back. To me, he's an important piece. Are you going to let Bassett go? I mean, pitching is the name of the game. So how deep are our owners is Mr. Cohen's pockets? We'll see. It's going to be very interesting how this all unfolds in the offseason.
Keith, we mentioned the Mets Hall of Fame. What about the National Hall of Fame? Now, I've told you that I actually did not vote for you for the Hall of Fame. I've come around on that. Now, I think the analytics has kind of opened our eyes. I don't know how you feel exactly about analytics, but if you look at your on-base percentages, your WAR, it's pretty impressive. You know, I got the full a book from Scott Boras, your former agent, and it's quite convincing. I've got to say, you had a 403 on base percentage over an 8-year period, which is the highest in that 8-year period, and you were first, second, or third in 7 out of those 8 years. You know, defensively, you had the best total zone runs. I don't know what exactly that is, but you have the best for first base. And, I mean, you compare favorably to a lot of first basemen who've had the most Gold Gloves at their positions. I don't know. What do you think about now about the Hall of Fame? Have you come around on analytics a little bit? Because it shows what a great player you were in particular. And December, I think you potentially could be on the ballot. It's the modern era. You're still part of the modern era. What do you think about the Hall of Fame? And I know you mentioned you thought Tommy John, you liked him. Is there anybody else in particular you would like beside yourself?
Well, I don't shoot. I think that, Al Oliver needs some consideration. He's almost had 3,000 hits. He was my favorite number 3 hitter. He was a heck of a player. As far as analytics are concerned, I'm pretty much when it first came out, I was, conservative and resistant, but I've come around. There's a lot of good things that you can glean from analytics, and a lot of helpful things. Would I have used them when I played? Would I have gotten on a computer like these guys do and look at the video? Another thing too is there's more teams, there's more pitchers. You're not playing the other division in your league but once, 6 games a year. And that's ridiculous to me. And that's because of interleague play. And now they're gonna up the ante and just play every team in the American League. I mean, to me, it's a travesty. It really is. It takes away from division games. And just because of interleague play, we used to play in September, you played in division. You would get through the West Coast team a second trip, whether it was home or away, you get rid of them. There was only 2 divisions then. The first week of September, and then you had 3.5 weeks of division, and that's where it all boiled down to. And it's not there anymore, and I think it's a huge mistake. And I think the schedule is a huge mistake, what they've done, the changes to the schedule. I'm kind of getting off the beaten track here. What was interesting to me was that we didn't have computers. We had to use our brain, and we had our own filing cabinet up in our head. I mean, I looked at, Elias sent me a printout of all the pitchers I faced at the end of my career when I retired. And Carlton was on the top, and I faced him the most. And I had like 152 at-bats. I had not played appearances, at-bats against Carlton. He was always in division. But I knew the relief pitchers that were coming in, and I knew what they had. I knew how they wanted to pitch me. And I was stunned that guys like Bedrosian and Ron Reed, who was in my division, the relief pitchers, I only had like 30, maybe 40 at bats against them, but I knew what they had, and I expected a whole heck of a lot more. Some I only had like in the 18 or 21 at bats against, but I knew what they had. I think it's more difficult with the amount of teams today and the 13-man pitching staffs. There's more pitchers and there's more throwers today. Grip it and rip it. Don't know what they're doing. They got great arms, and those kind of guys were always the AAA pitchers that came up in September. You couldn't get a feel for them because they might throw you an inside corner fastball and the catcher set up outside. It wasn't meant to be. And so you really couldn't get a feel for those guys. So I think it's more difficult. As far as the Hall of Fame is concerned and the analytics, I mean, Ted Simmons, I thought, said it pretty nicely in his acceptance speech. I'm glad Ted got in. Thought he was very deserving, and he pretty much said analytics helped him out. So, I don't understand what OPS plus is. I know what OPS is. There's certain analytic categories that I'm familiar with that mean something to me, that are important when I prepare for a game. But it's hard for me to translate that from my time playing when there wasn't, what it means. But my father always told me, he groomed me to be a 3-hitter. And he said that the 3-hitter is the Tony Oliva, the Tommy Davis, the Tony Gwynn, your best hitter offensively, your average hitter. He's got to be a clutch hitter, and he's got to walk because he's in front of the 4, 5, and 6 hitters, the big power guys behind. So he's got a dual role, third hitter. That is to drive in runs, be a clutch hitter, and also score runs and get on base for the big bombers behind you. So I was groomed at a very young age for that. And then I know that everybody says that on-base percentage wasn't that important when I played. I was very much aware of my on-base percentage.
Keith, just for our listeners so they know, you're not on you came and went from the writers' ballot. The next group that's being voted on is the contemporary baseball era. That's from 1980 on, which is certainly your group. It's a 16-person committee. John and I, it's not right. It's 4 writers. None of them are me or John. They will pick 8 players. It's you, it's Don Mattingly, it's Lou Whitaker, but it's also all the guys who just fell off. Bonds, Clemens, Sosa, Schilling. I mean, there's about 20 people who are going to have to get into about an 8-person group. So I wonder, what will it mean to you? What does it mean to you about trying to get, just being on that ballot when they announce it in November? And how much does it mean to you to get in eventually?
Well, thanks for informing me, because I've heard I didn't know there was only 8 players, number one. So thanks for that.
It's 8 people, I should say. They managers, umpires, executives. So it's 8 people. I mean, there's a ton. If you look at the list of who's potentially on there, you'll want to consider probably 20, 25 to get to 8. So I throw that question out to you again.
Well, obviously, if I'm selected out of that list of great players, it would be that would be an honor in its own. And obviously, I mean, to get in the Hall of Fame is, when you're a kid growing up, you would play in Little League, and I idolized Mickey Mantle, and you get out there. I copied my stance on Mickey Mantle's left-handed stance. Mickey was always a little crouched from the left side, and you dream of getting to a World Series. I think at that young age, it'd be great to be a Hall of Famer. But obviously, it's I've got my number retired. I'm in the Cardinal Hall of Fame as well as the New York. It would be the crown, the big gem. It would put a big cap on my career. It would be absolutely wonderful. But I haven't got any say over it. There's a lot of players I feel that should be in there and that aren't. And I think I'm glad that it's starting to loosen up a little bit. I'm glad that Jim Cott got in. He had 280 something wins. I think Tommy John should get in. He's got 280 something wins, I believe. And Tommy John pitched great in postseason for the Dodgers. I think he's a no-brainer. And No, there's just I'm just glad that it's just not so. I mean, baseball always had it was the highest bar, and I still feel it should be of all the sports the highest bar. But I always felt that maybe it was a little bit too high, and so we'll see. We'll see what happens. It would be absolutely. I don't know how I would react if I got a phone call, but it's certainly for me it would be absolutely phenomenal.
You know, I'm going to change the subject just a little bit. First of all, happy birthday to Haji. I believe it's Haji's birthday coming up, right? 20 years old, I think.
He's a Libra. He's October 10th.
That's very good. Haji is Keith's cat, for everybody who doesn't know that, but Keith's on Twitter occasionally, not frequently, but occasionally, and he'll mention his cat, who's a big part of his life. So another big part of your life is the Gary, Keith, and Ron. You guys have been together forever. I've lost track of the number of years. I think probably older than Haji. You've been there together quite a number of years. What do you think the secret is to your success? And pitchers. When I was a beat writer, at least the pitchers and hitters didn't hang out together. Were you and Ron hanging out together? Were you friends on the team when you played together? And what do you think the secret is to the chemistry of the three of you?
Well, actually, it's our 17th year, so we tie in longevity. Bob Murphy, Lindsay, Nelson, and Ralph Kiner, who were the original announcers. They went 17 years together. So next year, if I get re-signed and the SNY wants me back, we'll be the longest running Met broadcast television team in Met history, which is kind of nice, of a great honor. I think the key to me is that we have a pitcher and we have a hitter. So there are things about pitching that I don't know. I don't know mechanics, and I can't go into in-depth what it is to pitch. If a pitcher's got bad mechanics, Ronnie brings that and a lot more too, and I bring the offensive side. But I think the big key to the success is Gary and the play-by-play. Gary is, I think, the best play-by-play guy by far. He's intelligent. He knows the game. He's the conductor of the orchestra. He brings Ronnie and myself into the broadcast. He keeps us on our toes. He asks us questions. He's very inquisitive, and he has his opinions too. But I just think that the key is Gary. Gary, I've always said it. I don't think the broadcast would be nearly as good if we didn't have Gary at play-by-play.
Keith, I just want to wrap up by saying I learned two important things. The Mets have a very, very important free agent we didn't mention this offseason, which is you. Number two, your cat and my twin boys have the same birthday, 10-10. I have 10-10 twins.
Okay. Oh, wow.
But something we did know, that you were an insightful conversationalist, and John and I thank you very much for joining us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.
Oh, great. I'm glad to be on anytime, guys.
John, no surprise, right? Keith Hernandez was insightful and interesting as always. What stood out to you from the interview with Keith?
Yeah, a couple of things. He was pretty certain that the Mets need a left-hander in that bullpen. Of course, it's too late to get that left-hander, but obviously he talked very complimentarily about the team, really likes the Mets, but was concerned about the left-hander. The other thing that I thought was interesting was about the Hall of Fame. He didn't jump on it right away and say, I should be in the Hall of Fame. He talked about Tommy John, Al Oliver, other people. He was very, very kind about it, I thought.
Yeah, he was, and I think that you hit a key point because the last 3 weeks of the season for the Mets is about holding off Atlanta, but also figuring out what their bullpen is. Does that include Tylor Megill, and does it include David Peterson as their left-hander going into the playoffs? And is it trustworthy to Buck Showalter or not? Obviously, we'll be covering that and a lot more in our future shows. So thanks for listening to the show. It's a New York Post podcast. Thanks to Jake Brown and Andrew Hartz for producing the show. Thanks to the folks here at MCM, our new studio, for everything that you did here. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be nice enough to give us a 5-star rating on Apple and Spotify. He's Jon Heyman. I'm at Joel Sherman 1. That's on Twitter. And please join us this Tuesday and every Tuesday on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.